Hey guys, my name is Matsumo, and welcome to our episode of Sunday Mailbox. This is a video series where you, the viewer, can submit your gaming-related questions, and then I'll give my humble opinion on them. To get the formalities out of the way real quick, if you'd like to submit your own question that can be featured in an upcoming episode, you can do so by leaving a comment down below, or by sending me a Facebook or Twitter message. The first question for thee is, are you worried about what it means for 3-speed operators now that the BOSG has an ACOG? I am not really all that concerned about this. I actually think it's really cool that Vigil now has access to this attachment slot, because not only do I think it makes him a little bit more viable with this weapon, but also this kind of shows that Ubisoft isn't being as strict with their design philosophy and giving themselves a little bit of wiggle room when it's necessary to give a weapon or give an operator a little bit of an improvement. You guys probably remember a long time ago, they basically stated that they were only going to give 3 armored operators on defense access to the ACOG because that's just the way they wanted to balance out the game. And while by and large, I think that this was a good decision. It reined in the power of 3-speed operators. Back then, everyone played as Bandit and Jaeger, and while I kind of get that that's still sort of the case now, at least with Jaeger, he has like a 90% pick rates, everyone played as them because high speed plus an ACOG is an unstoppable combination. But at the same time, this also elevated the 3 armored operators, made them more viable, and gave them a specific role on defense. And so I really like that aspect about it, but it also restricted them design-wise. Now, though, with the addition of Goyo and obviously the BOSG ACOG, it's clear that they don't mind mixing things up for the sake of trying to make certain operators a bit more viable. And so with all that being said, I do not have any problem with the BOSG ACOG, because if we're being completely honest with ourselves, this is a meme weapon. It is not a good weapon, even in the right hand. Yes, you are going to see some montages out there where people are taking people out left, right, and center, and the addition of the ACOG is a buff. At its core, that is an upgrade for this, and it is going to be a nice improvement, especially for those long-range shots, but that doesn't take away all of the downsides of using this thing, and so even with it, I still think that it is going to be one of the more mediocre weapons in the game, and if you do want to be competitive, you're going to want to use his other primary. What I honestly find more interesting about all of this, though, is that Ubisoft has set an interesting precedent by actually going through with this change. This all got started because of a YouTuber. Bikini was the one that I believe started it all, where he kind of rallied behind the hashtag BOSG ACOG. He got his viewers involved, other YouTubers as well, and now we are at the point where we are today. The reason why I find this so interesting is that it clearly shows that a single YouTuber, or, you know, the community itself, is able to actually impact design at Ubisoft, which I don't necessarily think is a bad thing. I think that the community should be involved, but the fact that Ubisoft has clearly done this, I find to be quite intriguing. And so this begs the question, if another YouTuber or the community starts to go like hashtag buff castle or something that isn't really going to have an impact on the gameplay, because this is probably the reason why Ubisoft went through it, at the end of the day, the weapon is still probably going to be very mediocre. It's not going to be a huge balance change. That's probably why they did it in the first place. But if another YouTuber or the community rallies behind a random idea, is that then going to influence Ubisoft to add it into the game? I have no idea. This might be a one-off thing, but that was kind of the takeaway that I got from all of this. In general, though, as I stated at the very beginning, I don't think that you need to worry that Ubisoft is now going to do a 180 on their design philosophy and now introduce or make changes to the 3-speed operators and give them access to the ACOG. There might be some exceptions in the future, especially for weapons that could use some improving. I'm glad that Ubisoft has given themselves the leeway to do so, but I don't think they're going to all of a sudden completely change the way that this game plays. The next question comes from Blake, and it is it fair that Ubisoft to patch out the parkour spots on the maps, the purple tarps, skyscraper, temple spots, etc.? Absolutely. You have to remember that a lot of those locations that players were getting into were not intended by Ubisoft. They didn't want players on the purple tarps because it changes up the map balance. When they were designing the maps from the very beginning, they had no intention of that line of sight being on that objective. And as soon as there is that line of sight, it disrupts the flow or the actual balance of the map. Now, I know that some people will say that this is one of the great aspects about Rainbow Six Siege. You're always learning learning and discovering new things, and there's no way that Ubisoft is going to be able to design the map specifically to account for everything that the player base is going to discover. They may not have even thought of a certain tactic when you're trying to approach a certain objective. That doesn't mean that tactic specifically is bad or should be removed from the game entirely. That's just the charm of Siege. And so why should they remove these certain angles or these parkour spots if that's just kind of a key component of what makes Rainbow Six Siege what it is today? Now, the counter argument to that, though, is that Ubisoft has clearly illustrated that when they do have bad map balance and map design, that they're willing to go on in and completely rework the map to try to improve upon them. That's why we're getting the new and improved theme park. Canal just got a rework. They've been going, and this has been a theme lately. We're probably going to get the same thing for year 5, where they're going through and learning from their past mistakes to try to improve and shore up some of the issues that these maps have to make these maps more competitive. And so to say that these problems should persist in the game simply because the player base discovered them and that should be okay isn't really the best argument, at least in my opinion. And so while I do see where you're coming from, these parkour spots can just simply be a lot of fun. It can make a map feel more dynamic. It can increase the skill ceiling because there's now more things that you need to account for and learn while playing on them. But at the same time, I think it's completely reasonable for Ubisoft to say that no, this gives an unfair advantage for either offense or defense. That is something that we did not intend whatsoever, and go on in and make those changes when they are necessary. The next question comes from Yang, and it is, what are your thoughts about the recent leak of Modern Warfare Battle Royale having a 200-player map? I did hear about that news, and honestly, the more that I think about it, the more that it makes sense. First of all, having a 200-player map is really exciting, but also comes with many concerns. The first big one is network-related issues. Not a lot of Battle Royale games out there have 200 players for good reason. Having that many people on a map is going to result in a lot of lag and network problems. It's cool to have a large player base, but it doesn't really matter if everyone is teleporting or your shots aren't registering or it just doesn't play very well because of poor networking. And so if they're able to work around that, that's awesome, but it's definitely something that caught my eye immediately when I saw that large player counts. Now, one thing that does lend a bit of credibility to this leak is the supposed map that was revealed. Not only is it gigantic because it has to account for this large player count, but it also basically takes the Spec Ops and Ground War maps and plops them all around it. If you ever played on the map Farm and you look out in the distance, you can actually see the map District all the way out there. And so it seems like Infinity Ward was already designing this from the very beginning to have this gigantic BR map from the very start. Another thing that lends credibility to this is that I always wondered why there was so much detail on the fringe of these maps when there's literally nothing out there. Especially on District, every single one of these buildings has like intricate rooms. There's all these different ways of moving around the outside of the map, but they're like 200 meters away from any objective. Granted, maybe you could go up to the top of the rooftop and then maybe get a line of sight on one of the objectives if you're using certain weapons. Maybe that's going to be viable, but it really seems like they put all this effort on a part of the map that no one is ever really going to see, and so I always wondered why they made such an effort. But now, it makes a lot more sense. They had every intention of actually making this a BR map, and maybe not necessarily a Ground War map from the very start. I would not be surprised if they actually built the BR map first, and then shrunk everything down, or just kind of sectioned things off for Ground War. I would not be surprised by that whatsoever, especially based off of these details. Overall, though, I am interested in having a new BR coming to Call of Duty. If it has the gameplay that is really satisfying in Modern Warfare, has solid netcode even with that 200 players, and has a lot of content and support from the developers long term, that could be really enjoyable, but obviously, it is way too early to tell, and we are gonna have to wait and see. The next question comes from Zach, and it is, how about being able to cook the flash like you can a nade, so if you cook it for longer, it goes off almost as soon as it hits? Well, I'm not entirely certain why this is the case, but if I had to take a guess, it's for balancing reasons. Because flashes have a very large flash radius around them, you just have to look at them even from a distance and you're going to get that flash effect. If you had the ability to literally have them go off as soon as they hit the wall or hit the ground or whatever, that would make it very difficult for the defensive team to be able to work around it. If you know that someone is in the room on the left-hand side, you get that flash to go off instantaneously, you can round the corner and immediately take them out, and there's nothing that defender can do about it. And so by having it where there is that brief little delay when it bounces, it gives more interaction between the two different sides. And so while I'm right there with you, that flashes a lot of times can feel very inconsistent. It just doesn't seem like they're ever doing exactly what they're supposed to do. I believe it's for that very reason why they haven't given us that kind of ability. But yeah, guys, that is about it for today's episode of Sunday Mailbox. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you thought about what we discussed in today's video. Are you really enjoying the BOSG ACOG in Rainbow Six Siege? Do you think that that is something that Ubisoft should not be adding to the game? Give me your reasons why or why not down below. As always, if you'd like to submit your own question for an upcoming episode, you can also leave a comment or by sending me a Facebook or Twitter message. But until next time, guys, have a good one and take it easy.